1.7 million hits in 1 month. This is one of the many examples of the influence that comes from the SEC and how much attention the SEC gets. So we went around asking people, is the media biased towards the SEC?
Do you believe there's a SEC bias by the media and ESPN?
Yeah, definitely.
And why do you think that?
Anytime you turn on ESPN and college football is on, 90% of the time it's going to be something about the SEC.
Some say that's been earned, so they don't claim it's biased, but you still claim it's biased even though people would say it's earned by the SEC.
Why not give any of the other divisions credit? Like Ohio State, Florida State, and all that. I mean, they're just as good.
Okay, thank you for your time.
I do.
And why is that?
I think because the past years, okay, SEC I think is obviously the best conference just all around, and they're gonna focus where like the stories are, and like everyone wants to see the best plays and the most competitive football. I think that's in the SEC.
Right. So, but you still think there's like a
So
bias?
why is ESPN biased? Well, I think they're biased, but I think
You
there's
think it's been earned?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's been very obviously earned.
Do you think that the media is biased towards the SEC?
Yes.
Why?
It's not because the SEC is good, but it's because the media is going to be biased towards the teams that are the best. Statistically, the SEC is a little better than average, but it's because it's very top-heavy. It's not because the whole conference is like exceptionally good. And the media does have a vested interest in the number one team. They want the Heisman recruits. They want the people going to the national championship because that's the stuff that sells. It's not because the SEC is good, but because it's very top-heavy.
Do you think that the bias comes only from that, or the fact that because the teams are bigger, like you said, that there's more revenue being pumped into the media, into ESPN, into the SEC network, because people tend to watch more of the SEC games and they cover them more and they get more money?
Absolutely. People who think that college football is anything other than a for-profit organization, much like the NFL, are deluding themselves. It is still very much for a profit. Does that mean it's bad? Not necessarily, but it's absolutely an SEC bias.
Do you think that the media is biased towards the SEC?
I think there is a bias, but the bias is justified because when you have an SEC team in the national championship, I think 7 or 8 of the last 9 years, including 8 straight before the loss last year, and you have the two most marketable coaches in Nick Saban and Les Miles, there will be a bias. However, it's justified because the best teams every year come from the South, and the Southeast Conference is where it's at.
Do you think that bias comes from the fact that the teams are better, or the fact that the games tend to be bigger and the people tend to care more about the SEC, and there is more revenue being pumped into ESPN, the media, from SEC games, or just the sport itself?
Well, I mean, I think it's a variation of everything, to be honest with you.
I don't think there's a bias towards the SEC as there is a bias towards teams that win.
People say the SEC is top-heavy.
I don't agree with that at all.
You don't agree with that? Why not?
I think regardless of where you go in the SEC, you're going to find good competition.
Is the better conference, or do you think it's also because the all this attention that we get brings in more revenue to ESPN and to the media?
Again, the money's going to be where the winning teams are.
Do you think there is a bias from ESPN and the media towards or in favor of the SEC?
No, I don't think I wouldn't say there's a bias. I do think that the SEC is the best conference in college football, and I think ESPN shows probably more coverage of the SEC because there are more teams relevant for the national championship discussion.
Now that we've gotten a few opinions from our colleagues around campus, let's look at 2 of the most prestigious college football commentators and what they have to say about the issue.
What's good for the sport overall, what's good for interest in a playoff and ratings, is to have teams from all over the country represented. to have a West Coast team, to have a Midwest team, to have a team from the Big 12 or the ACC, and maybe an SEC. Of course, they're going to watch down here, whoever's in it, they're going to watch.
Somebody said we've got SEC bias. Deal with it. They're the best.